It's the fall of 1889, and in the ancient city of Kyoto, Japan, a small business was founded. This is where Nintendo, a manufacturer of Hanafuda, traditional Japanese playing cards, began operation, and for over half a century, that's precisely what they were known for. As the 20th century progressed, the world had changed, and so did the vision of Nintendo's leadership. The mid-20th century was a point of rigorous experimentation for Nintendo. They explored unconventional ventures such as instant rice, taxi services, and allegedly brothels, although that's never been proven. Repositioning as a toy company, Nintendo had begun transitioning into the video game market with hits like Popeye, Mario Bros., and of course, Donkey Kong. Following the video game crash of 1983, Nintendo rose from the ashes and tricked the general public into buying a home video game console once again by marketing it as a toy, hence the inclusion of Rob the Robot and the Zapper for Duck Hunt. They designed the console as if it were a VCR, having the user push the cartridges into the front, eventually giving it the nickname the front loader, to distinguish it between its later revision, the top loader. This Trojan horse method of marketing their new video game console led to the industry being reborn into the eventual multi-trillion-dollar industry that it is today. In the late 1980s, Nintendo would face fierce competition from Sega, another Japanese video game developer with lineage that ties back to 1960. Their successful home console, the Genesis, gave the NES a run for its money. Nintendo's marketing division then began positioning their sequel consoles, the Super Nintendo and eventually N64, as being more powerful than any other console in the market. While the Super Nintendo had a fair amount of success with this formula, the N64 flopped compared to newcomer Sony and their PlayStation, allowing third-party developers to make games that eclipsed Nintendo's offerings with larger and cheaper CDs. Following the release of the PlayStation 2, Nintendo tried once again to win with raw power, leading to the GameCube, a far more capable console than the PlayStation 2 on paper. However, it lacked DVD playback functionality, and eventually its most powerful console claim was dethroned by newcomer, the Xbox, created by Microsoft. By the end of the generation, the GameCube found itself in second to last place, only beating out Sega's Dreamcast, their final console. Nintendo had now lost their market share to two newcomers 2 generations in a row. Following this revelation, Nintendo decided to go back to the drawing board. What if, instead of putting R&D money into a new console with cutting-edge technology, they decided to reshape the way that we play video games as gamers? What happened next was codenamed the Revolution, and it certainly was.
The graveyard of any industry is filled with the headstones of companies who decided to keep doing things the same old way, playing only on the margin, making things just a little bit better. And you'll be playing Wii in the fourth quarter of 2006.
By positioning itself away from making a console that wins on pure power alone, Nintendo had single-handedly won the generation. Over 100 million Wiis were sold, beating both the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 by over 15 million units each. Nintendo had secured a spot in the market that had existed but had yet to be filled, as discussed by late Nintendo president Satoru Iwata in his Blue Ocean strategy. They marketed the Wii to casual consumers who were put off by how much more advanced video games had become, leading to a console that appealed to literally everybody. Hyper-casual titles such as Wii Sports and Wii Fit, core Nintendo titles such as Super Smash Bros. And Mario Kart, and third-party support for more hardcore titles like Call of Duty and Resident Evil. While Nintendo's next console, the Wii U, had undersold compared to its prior generation due to lousy marketing, the 2017 release of the Nintendo Switch proved once again that focusing on raw power should come secondary to focusing on intuitive new ways of playing games that push both Nintendo as a company as well as the entire gaming industry forward. Nintendo then ignored literally everything they have learned over the past 25 years to release a console that only stood out from its predecessor due to its power.
I'm mostly joking. The Switch 2 does have quite a few features that set itself apart from its predecessor. However, now that we're a year in, I also do want to take a moment to talk about a few of its shortcomings.
Now, before we begin, I do want to make something abundantly clear. I love Nintendo. I grew up with their products, I continue to purchase them as an adult. I even take pride in owning some of their weird failed experiments. I own 3 Wii U's, I own like 6 GameCubes, I even own 2 Virtual Boys if you count the NSO one. I have nothing against this company personally, but that's exactly what they are. A company. They're not in this business to make friends, they're in this business to make money. And I know that there are already some people that are foaming at the mouth for me even hinting that I'm not a fan of everything the Switch 2 has brought to the table. So again, please keep in mind, this video is my opinion as a longtime Nintendo fan. You don't have to agree, as a matter of fact, I very much expect you to disagree with a lot of this. With that being said, let's get into this. Hardware-wise, the Nintendo Switch 2 is a genuine step up from the Switch 1. Instead of using a chip from 2015 in their console from 2017, they're now using a chip from 2021, which honestly caught me off guard the first time I saw it. You'd think they want something a little bit more cutting edge, but I suppose in order to keep the battery from going to shit, it'd make more sense to go with something a little bit older with a bit of a slower clock speed. The screen has seen a noticeable improvement, with it now being 1080p instead of the much lower resolution 720p screen on the Nintendo Switch 1. Unfortunately, it is not OLED. Why not? The Switch 1 had an OLED model, and this is a premium new device. I'm guessing they're going to release a Switch 2 OLED at some point, and they don't want to take away from future sales. Nintendo loves doing hardware revisions for their successful consoles, so it wouldn't surprise me if they're holding back on a few features to make the Switch 2 OLED a little bit more enticing. The Joy-Cons also have seen some improvements, with them now featuring an IR sensor on the internal rail. This can act as a mouse for more precise gameplay. Games like Cyberpunk work well with it, and I'm assuming Call of Duty and hopefully Splatoon 4 will also take advantage of this feature. Joysticks are still susceptible to Joy-Con drift, by the way. Thanks, guys. For those who like acronyms, the screen also supports VRR and HDR, and the console can output in 4K. Aside from that, there aren't a tremendous amount of other changes to talk about. It really is just a Nintendo Switch, but beefed up quite a bit. A lot of the heavy lifting does come from that new Tegra SoC, which can actually pack a pretty big punch. Putting PS5 games directly next to Nintendo Switch 2 games shows that there really isn't that much of a difference between the two, aside from one console being handheld and the other having a fucking aneurysm whenever you try to unplug it. Although I may joke that the Switch 2 is a bit underpowered, I personally have no gripe whatsoever with the power that it does have. It runs pretty much whatever's tossed at it competently enough while still having decent battery life, but I will absolutely not give the battery any more credit than that. It is decent at its best and bad at its worst. I find myself running for the charger more often with my Switch 2 than I ever did with my Switch 1. That is at its best unfortunate and at its worst unacceptable for a successor console. Again, I'm sure the Switch 2 OLED is going to have a much better battery life and they're going to position that as a selling point, but I would have gladly paid extra at launch if that meant I could have played the Switch 2 for over 2.5 hours on a charge. Booting up the console, it has the exact same boring-ass black and white themes that the Nintendo Switch 1 had. This just bums me out because both the Wii and Wii U had a ton more personality in their home menus, and the 3DS straight up let you purchase new themes for it in the eShop. I don't think this feature would be very difficult for Nintendo to program, and they're sitting on so much potential cash here. I genuinely wonder why they haven't introduced it yet. But by far, my biggest complaint with the Nintendo Switch 2 has been on the software side of things. Now, I want you to think back to the first year of the Nintendo Switch 1. We had a brand new mainline Zelda game, a sequel to Splatoon, a brand new 3D Mario game, a Fire Emblem spin-off, a sequel to Xenoblade, a sequel to Bayonetta, and definitive versions of both Mario Kart 8 and Pokken Tournament DX. And that's not even counting the third-party offerings. All of these were big-name Nintendo IPs. Now compare that to the first year of the Switch 2. Well, we got a new Donkey Kong, finally. We got Dragon Drive. We have a Hyrule Warriors sequel, Kirby Air Ride, Mario Kart World, Mario Tennis, a Pokemon spin-off, and a Yoshi game. No new mainline Zelda or Mario games, no sequel to Splatoon, pretty much all lower tier titles with the exception of Donkey Kong and maybe the new Yoshi game. The Pokemon, Kirby, Zelda, and Mario games that we did get are all spin-offs. They're much lower tier titles than the Nintendo Switch 1's offering in its first year. Now, I'm not trying to say that any of these games are bad. I've heard fantastic things about Pokopia, and Mario Tennis looks like a good time. But when I'm spending $70 on a game nowadays, I don't want something that just looks good. I want a mainline title that I know is going to hold me for a long time. And although Nintendo is offering their digital games for a little bit cheaper than their physical ones, which is weird and something I don't like, but that's a topic for a different video, I still can't help but feel a little bit miffed on the output for the first year in terms of exclusives. Now, I know a lot of you are probably shocked that I didn't mention the Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom remasters nor Metroid Prime 4, but that's for a simple reason. These are Nintendo Switch 1 games that have Nintendo Switch 2 versions. As a matter of fact, when you buy them physically, you're getting the Nintendo Switch 1 cartridge with the Nintendo Switch 2 upgrade. That's what that fine print says on the bottom of all the boxes. And while I don't have a problem with this, I'm glad more and more people can experience these games. The majority of Nintendo Switch 1 games just flat out run better on the Nintendo Switch 2 anyway, or offer free upgrades. And some of the upgrades that they decided to make paid versus the ones they offer for free are very confusing to me. Pokemon Violet used to look like a middle school PowerPoint presentation and run just as poorly, and now it runs at 4K at a locked 60 frames per second. This upgrade was free. Breath of the Wild's upgrade doubled the frame rate and maybe touched up the visuals here and there in a couple of places, but for the most part it looks the exact same as the Switch 1 game. And yet it costs $10, and that does not include the DLC. Same story with Mario Odyssey and Tears of the Kingdom, literally just unlocking the frame rate and bumping up the visuals so they look a little bit better, but one upgrade was paid and the other one was free. They do the same things. Why do I have to pay for this one and not the other one? But by far my least favorite thing to come out of the Nintendo Switch 2 has been the $80 price tag on a handful of titles. Now, I'm well aware that the topic of AAA prices going from $60 to $70 has been a very hot button issue, and that everyone in the gaming sphere has their own opinion on this. Now, without getting too deep into it in this video, if a game costs $69.99, I expect it to be of the utmost highest quality that I have played this generation. If the game is anything below a personal 9 out of 10 for me, I don't feel that a $70 price tag is warranted. So needless to say, when I started seeing Nintendo charging $80 for select titles, I expect these games to be damn near flawless. Especially when the games are over 3 years old, like Tears of the Kingdom. This does not need to be $80, guys. As a matter of fact, Nintendo has even agreed with this sentiment in the past. Remember Player's Choice? Remember Nintendo Selects? Even if inflation does force the price of these games to go up from $20 to $30 or whatever, that would still be better than charging full price for a game that came out a third of a decade ago. And not to dwell on this too much, I don't think Nintendo's new $80 offerings are very enticing as they are either. Mario Kart World is quite a bit of fun, yes, but if you don't care about free roaming or Knockout Tour and you're considering picking up Mario Kart 8 Deluxe instead, if you're factoring in the Booster Course DLC, which is only $5 more, you are getting so much more gameplay from Mario Kart 8 Deluxe plus the Booster Course DLC than you are from Mario Kart World. And on top of that, you might even be able to find a used copy of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe for even cheaper than Mario Kart World. I'm planning on making an entirely separate discussion piece based off of Mario Kart World, which I'm going to be posting on my second channel. It probably won't be scripted or anything like that, just me voicing my opinions and concerns on the new game. And while I do think Mario Kart World is a fantastic time, I do think it's lacking in a few too many areas for me to recommend it for its full asking price of $80. And that's kind of my opinion on the Switch 2 summed up. It's a great console, but with a few nagging flaws. While I do think the hardware is very fairly priced for the console you're getting, even with the $50 upcharge from what it was at launch, the software prices for the experiences you're getting are far from a good value in my opinion. When a lot of consumers feel that $70 games are already overpriced, you have to work your ass off to make that $80 game really seem like it's worth it. And to me, I have yet to find a Nintendo Switch 2 game that's worth the $70 asking price, let alone the $80 asking price. However, we are still early in this console's lifespan, and there are plenty of good things to come. We have yet to see a new 3D Mario game, we have yet to see the new 3D Zelda game, we have yet to see a new Super Smash Bros. I will gladly eat crow and purchase a $70 or $80 Nintendo game if it does genuinely seem like it's worth it to me. If I feel like I can get $70 or $80 worth of gameplay out of it, I will happily admit that I'm wrong and purchase said game. I mean, hell, I already did do it for Mario Kart World, even if I do kind of regret it.
So those were my thoughts on the Switch 2, and I'd love to know yours in the comments. Again, I think the console is totally fine, I just wish the software was a little bit cheaper and that there was a little bit more to play within its first year. More on the mainline series of games side of things. Oh shoot, Nintendo just announced the Nintendo Switch 3. Classic Nintendo. I'll take 40.